NFL free agency is basically over and the NFL draft is still a month away. So what the hell do we do? Well, we play best ball on Underdog. That's what we do. I'm going to bust out now my top early values on Underdog, and I scoured their very up-to-date late March ADP, and I really studied it hard to come up with what I think are the best values from 10, and we'll start with number 10. It's Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders with an ADP of 114 and RB 37. I know they still have Antonio Gibson here, and it's not a great offensive line. But look, the man got shot and still handled 17 carries a game last year. That projects to 290 carries over a full season, which would have been the fifth most in the NFL last year. I thought it looked pretty good. I think he should be going a little earlier than RB 37. I think he's a 260-plus touch guy, and there's only about 15 or 20 of those dudes in the NFL last year. My number 9 early value, Rashod Bateman, 86 overall is the ADP, wide receiver 43. I think that's where the advantage can be gained because this is a guy who was wide receiver 28 off the board last summer, and not much has changed really, assuming, of course, Lamar Jackson is here, and that's a big deal. But if he is, I think it's an addition by subtraction with no Greg Roman, a.k.a. passing game caveman, as Todd Monken takes over, and he's going to be a little bit more about the forward pass. So if we do have Lamar Jackson in tow in Baltimore, Rashod Bateman's your number 1. I know he wasn't spectacular last year or as a rookie with 1.26 yards per route run, but I thought he looked pretty good via the old eyeball test. And again, he's the number 1 receiver unequivocally in Baltimore, regardless of what they do in the draft. My 10 Underdog values, counting up from 10, and we're up to number 7. And when I get on a player, if I think he's a baller, I'll double down. I'll triple down. I can't quit some of these players like Elijah Moore, my number 7 value right now on Underdog. We all know last year was an absolute catastrophe. Bad quarterback play. Of course, he had bad quarterback play, mediocre at best quarterback play for the Jets as a rookie back in 2021. But we all remember that 7-game run, 35 catches, 525 scrimmage yards, and 6 touchdowns. Good for wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 10 in points per game in that span. And obviously, major upgrade in Deshaun Watson, working opposite an alpha himself and Amari Cooper, some good players in the middle of the field like David Njoku and Harrison Bryant. Elijah Moore, a lot of single coverage, good spot for Eli Moore. Number 6 is Jake Ferguson, believe it or not. Now, value is a factor here with an ADP end of March, early April of 197, tight end 26. Love this kid when I interviewed him at the Combine, by the way, last year. Big fantasy guy, all about fantasy. Barry Alvarez's grandson over at Wisconsin. I watched him at the Senior Bowl last year in practice. Dude made it look easy, scored a touchdown in the game, and then did some fine work for the Dallas Cowboys, catching 19 of 22 targets last year as a rookie and some pretty good work in the red zone. And if you listen to me on Sirius XM, I started saying mid-season that Dalton Schultz was gone and that Jake Ferguson was kind of a plug-and-play guy, and he does run better, I think, than Dalton Schultz. And here we are. Now, they could draft a tight end in April's draft here, so we'll see about that. But I don't think it's really high on their priority list. So Jake Ferguson checks in here as my number 6 value early on Underdog. Number 5, Cam Akers, running back for the LA Rams, of course. The running backs are getting pushed down the board a little bit, but this is kind of absurd for a potential major bell cow. I know he's got some issues. I know he's no sure thing, but ADP of 82 overall, RB 25. I think we certainly look back to weeks 12 through 18 last year when, and I said around week 15, I'm like, let's get used to the fact that Cam Akers is a league winner, and he was the RB6 in total scoring, 4.9 yards a carry, caught 11 to 12 targets. I thought he looked kind of back compared to where he was as a rookie coming out of Florida State. And I think we've seen with D'Onta Foreman, the D'Onta Foreman we saw in 2021 was legitimate because that was proven again in 2022. Well, going off of that example, if the Cam Akers from the tail end of 2022 is for real and they don't draft or add another running back of note, we're looking good with Cam Akers at RB25 for sure. Sean McVay needs to get back to basics here, and he needs to run the rock with one back. That's what he normally likes to do. My number 4 value, my guy, Sky Moore. Did I oversell him last year? Yes, I did. But I also said that Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, and MVS were not going to do much as a trio, and I think I was correct in that regard. Sky was not ready for prime time last year, but I think a different story this year. I think he's locked into the slot already with Juju gone. 170-plus vacated targets. Great 10-yard split guy, short area burst guy, great hands. He'll be open. He's like a running back with the ball after the catch. Sky Moore, I'm not backing off of him whatsoever. My number 3 value early on for 2023 on Underdog. No, it's not sexy, but I'm trying to embrace the boring a little bit. And Najee Harris, a little boring, but I don't think any running back getting 300-plus touches is boring. And 300-plus is what he's gotten the first 2 seasons there in Pittsburgh. Touch total down 18% last year, but keep in mind he was dealing with that serious foot injury. I don't think Jalen Warren is going to be a big factor. Offense coordinator Matt Canada kind of stinks, but his issues and deficiencies are more evident in the passing game. And Najee is RB14 with an ADP of 42. So you want to go all in on the wide receivers early, like kind of everyone is? Fine. You can get Najee potentially as your RB2 in round 4, or at worst your RB1 late round 3. My number 2 value on Underdog Fantasy early on here, Deshaun Watson, who has emerged quickly here this year as my top quarterback target. I've been on this since like January. Now they get Elijah Moore, and they'll probably still add another weapon for Watson, who was, again, absolutely brilliant in 2020 with a 70% completion rate and a 33-7 touchdown to interception ratio. I did an early projection for Watson, and I got to do with like 360 fantasy points, like only 25 behind Jalen Hurts last year. And you can get Watson 5 rounds after Jalen Hurts this year. And my number 1 value early on 2023 on Underdog, another one of my guys, yes. I said last year he was going to be a top 35 running back, and he was, barely. Rashod White, who was RB35, right on the head there in points per game last year. I thought Leonard Fournette would miss a little bit more time than he did. Only missed the 1 game, but Rashod still made it. And obviously, with Leonard gone, assuming we don't get a Bijan Robinson in the draft or shockingly trade for Austin Eckler, I don't think there's anyone else on the planet who is taking Rashod White off the field in passing situations. So we're looking at 80-plus targets. I did a very conservative projection for Rashod, 285 touches, 60 grabs, 8 touchdowns, 245 points. That was good for RB10 last year. But yet, my man is still RB29 early on Underdog, ADP of 94. That is my top value early on in 2023 on Underdog. And again, if you've never played on Underdog, fantasypoints.com/underdog. See how you can get a subscription to fantasypoints.com this year for only $5. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.